Hey kids, did you know that a lawsuit was filed by Texas Attorney General Paxton? Ken Paxton, to be actually accurate, and challenging the inclusion of gender dysphoria under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 17, sorry, not 17, 1973. Yeah, that's the year, people. Let's go with that. Let me stop talking before I start putting my foot in the mouth and let AJ tell your story. AJ?
Thank you, Cynthia. You're correct. A lawsuit was filed by my very own Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton. And as you said, he wants to challenge the inclusion of gender dysphoria under Section 504. This act, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, protects individuals with disabilities from discrimination in federally funded institutions such as schools or hospitals. And while the lawsuit primarily targets gender identity protections, it also argues that Section 504 itself is unconstitutional, giving judges the option to eliminate it entirely. Now, the gender dysphoria clause was added by President Biden, and with the administration change, the lawsuit's future is currently uncertain. But in Texas alone, the outcome could impact over 400,000 students that rely on these protections. So this story is from khou.com by Victor Jacobo and Chris Hanna on February 15th, 2025.
That's a lot of people that you mentioned that could be affected. And I would even conjecture adversely concerning the outcome of how Section 504 is interpreted. So, AJ, I'm going to pick your brain a little bit if you would allow me. What would be the real world consequences if Section 504 were declared unconstitutional, particularly for students and patients relying on these protections?
There's a lot at stake. This protection applies to any organization that receives financial assistance from the federal government. It can be public schools, public colleges, universities. There's even libraries, museums, public parks, recreation programs. Local government agencies, right? Like I said, hospitals, clinics, mental health facilities, nursing homes that receive Medicare, Medicaid, anything that receives a grant from the federal government or a contract from the federal government has to comply with these non-discrimination rules from Section 504. So this is so that people with disabilities can have equal access to services, education, employment opportunities. It offers so much. It offers things like wheelchair ramps, elevators, being able to sit up at the front in school because you have a visual impairment, material in Braille for fully blind students, ASL interpreters for deaf people like myself, other accommodations for hearing impairments, classroom accommodations for things like taking a long break. My kid had a 504 plan because they're autistic and have a heart condition. So these accommodated things like being able to go to a cool down area when they felt like they had anxiety, things like being able to take a break during PE classes if they felt out of breath, all kinds of things for people with medical needs, like being able to carry your insulin pump, okay, if you're diabetic, being able to carry an EpiPen if you have life-threatening allergies, being able to go to the nurse. It's not just about the gender dysphoria issue that they're trying to target. Again, this is just about erasing transgender people, but they don't realize that if they were to succeed in taking away these 504 protections, they will be affecting so many children and adults, not just children, but adults as well, that benefit from all of these amazing protections.
It almost sounds like they're trying to turn the ADA upside down.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Because like the ADA in of itself, that particular legislation that came out, I want to say in 1992, does exactly what you say, gives people who are, Americans who are living with disabilities the ability to quell some of the things that they may be experiencing that may not necessarily affect, the general populace of the United States, right? So I can carry my EpiPen, I can carry my insulin pump, I can get special accommodations when I'm taking tests because I'm living with autism or I'm living with ADD, you know? And I think that if you just allow me just like a little room just to kind of just say what's on my mind, I just oftentimes just think about like people who happen to be on the right of these issues, and they don't really realize the real world implication taking away protections that have been fought for since the 50s and 60s can be even in their purview. I don't necessarily think that they understand that. Like, everything has been regulated to CRT, woke, and DEI bad. And if this 504, Section 504, just because it has a caveat of protections for transgender people in that same area, they are willing, I'm specifically talking about the right, are willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater until it gets to the point where you realize that, oh, well, I'm not transgender. Yeah, but you may be living with a disability. You may be diabetic. You may be, a person that is susceptible to anaphylaxis. You may be a person who, requires like durable medical equipment in order for you to be able to move through your day to day. So if this is you and this section protects you, are you willing to throw it out too? And as of late, I would conjecture that a lot of people would say yes. To prove what type of point, I don't know. But Glenn, I'm coming to you. I'm wondering, how does targeting gender dysphoria in Section 504 reflect broader legal and political trends regarding disability rights and LGBTQ protections?
Well, first, Cynthia, I have to say that I think a lot of these people, what really happens is they're going, yeah, kill that DEI, get rid of that woke garbage, get rid of that. And until they realize that they just sabotage their own self-interest. And then they're like, oh, and we see this time and again happening with the things that are going on, but people who've voted for certain people, and then when they got in office go, oh, I didn't mean you're going to fire me. And this type of mentality, it's the same thing with these types of programs. We see people who, let's get rid of that woke trash. Let's get rid of that until it affects them. And oh, that's what this does. Oh, because they've accepted someone telling them that this label belongs to this program. And so it's all garbage because it's all woke. So let's get rid of it. It's all DEI. Let's get rid of it. And so they don't do any actually in-depth digging, because most of these new politically aware people that we've seen come on scene in the last 10 years they couldn't tell you the basics of how a bill gets passed through Congress, much less the nuances of subcommittees or all the other things how things actually work in the real world. They just hear this, oh, and that sounds terrible, so let's go that way. And that's what's going on with this bill, because I don't think that when you got down to it, if most people really understood many of the things we're talking about with this, would be for this. My child goes to school under one of these plans as well because of their spinal cord injury. So when it comes down to it, this isn't a right or left issue, but it's been framed in a way that certain people on the right see it as a right or left issue. So until it impacts them personally, yeah, it's at the stick it to the libs. Let's go ahead and show those libs. Let's get rid of this woke stuff. Let's show them. Oh, wait, what? I'm not woke. I'm not woke at all. What's going on? Why did it cost me something? And I think that's what it's going to take before these people realize just how terrible the bill of goods they've been sold, because they've been sold in this concept that 1/10 or less of 1% is ruining their world. So we need to make sure we do something about it. When in reality, all they're doing is being sucker punched and going, hit me again, Sam.
I think you're brought out a really good point in that they don't understand the bill and they don't understand what is going on here. Because if you look at the gender dysphoria protections that are offered in the 504 plan, it isn't anything out there. It isn't anything woke. It's like having a flexible schedule for medical appointments, being able to access to medical devices, having seating preference if you want to sit, away from certain people, being respecting change in names or pronouns, which I guess that's where they see the big issue. I don't know. Or like being able to go to the nurse restroom instead of like the gendered restrooms. Like, what is the big fucking deal about that? It's just like barely anything. And they're completely throwing everything out because of these couple things that are like, oh my God, gender.
Everything that you have said is the wokiest of woke of woke of the woke of them.
But some DEI in there too.
Yeah, and CRT just to make people like Matt watch this go absolutely insane.
2 cups.
Yeah.
2 cups of CRT.
Yeah. It's a mixture, people. It's a cake. We're going to put 2 cups CRT, 3 cups DEI, and then a pinch of inclusion with a slammering of wokeness. And there goes your marginalized community cake. I don't know. I mean, like, I just was looking like all this particular stuff, and I'm just like, you just gonna fuck around and find out. Any person that is going to be, with those who happen to be in power, and let's keep it a buck. The people who are now deciding these particular policies are the oligarchs, the kleptocracy, and the robber barons. These are the people who are doing it, right? And at the end of the day, the only thing that they are concerned about is their own personal agenda. And their personal agenda is to make sure that their bottom line is actually maintained and continued under the administration that we are looking at right now. And if that means that a few people are going to be burned in the fray because of the policies that we are espousing, so fucking be it. I mean, like, I don't see, maybe my viewpoint when it comes to like things like this, maybe a bit on the jaded side of life. I will admit that. But according to like my own observation, I don't see any other way outside of that. And if that means that I need to work on myself, fine. I'll take that. I'll call a therapist tomorrow on BetterHelp and we can go ahead and go at it. But until then, unless like any other empirical data has been presented to me to actually say otherwise, I don't see it. So Aaron, I'm coming to you. My question for you is, how does targeting gender dysphoria in Section 504 reflect broader legal and political trends regarding disability rights and LGBTQ protections?
Well, now is the perfect time for anybody that wants to be dogmatic around this stuff to bring your lawsuits, because we have a corrupt Supreme Court. We have a Supreme Court that is no longer using law and case histories. I can't remember what that's called, but stare decisis, I think, is the name, where the Supreme Court defers to previous decisions and doesn't tend to reverse itself. We have a court now that doesn't really care, that they want to depend on traditions as the basis for laws instead of the actual laws and the actual previous decisions. So now is the perfect time to go after any one of your pet issues, especially gender and gender dysphoria. I have no doubt whatsoever that if this reaches its way to the Supreme Court, that it will strike this down. Because what happens is the law, I think from what I researched, the law states that reasonable accommodations have to be made, and that it's the government. I can't remember which department, if it's the Department of Education or what, but one of the departments actually outlines what this means, right? So they publish documents telling everybody, this is what this law means. It means that you can't discriminate for, and it just, itemizes it. It goes on for tens, dozens, hundreds of pages. I couldn't get through it all. It was so long. And so what they're going after is this explanation of what the law means and how it should be interpreted. And if that gets struck down, and then the Supreme Court has already struck down the Chevron doctrine, Chevron deference, where courts and judges were instructed to defer to experts in their fields when determining things, which gave the government the ability to write regulations. Well, the Supreme Court said, sorry, if it's not passed by a legislature, it doesn't count. So I have no doubt that if this gets overturned and makes it to the Supreme Court is going to say, sorry, if it's not in law, you can't write it down. And so they're going to be stuck with the literal words in Section 504 at best, and at worst, they're going to strike it down. And so this is the perfect time for getting these kinds of dogmatic religious issues struck down instead of by a corrupt Supreme Court. So yay them, I guess.
Well, it's kind of like what Justice Sotomayor said, the lemon test is dead.
No, yes it is. And what do they replace it with? Tradition. That's what I can't remember what he says in his decision, that we need to use traditions to determine what's legal and what's not. It's like, no, oh my gosh. Well, if that was true, we'd still have a lot of horrible things going on in this country.
But if you use traditions, then you're going to be regulated to the same way that, oh my God, Justice, what is his name? Scalia? I think it's Scalia. Used his moniker for tradition when he came up with his concurrence for overturning the Dobbs case. He used laws written in England in the freaking 1600s to cite tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, my dude, the United States wasn't even formed yet. What are you doing right now?
Yeah. If people that aren't lawyers can see the corruptness of their decisions. Yeah. If I can read a decision and look and see and know how corrupt it is, if a regular citizen can see that, it's just ridiculous and it's awful.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, no, it wasn't Scalia, it was Gorsuch. That's what that fucker. But regardless, AJ, I want to come back to you. I'm asking this question, basically saying, should states have the power to challenge federal civil rights protections, or does this set a dangerous precedent for rolling back other anti-discrimination laws?
That's a tough question, because I do think that states should have the ability to challenge these things, okay? But at the same time, you have right now, like, this lawsuit came from the states, and to challenge a whole protection of 504 plans, right? I guess the only thing that I see positive from the research that I was doing while looking for information on this article was an update on this. And I saw that last week it was announced that the lawsuit has been paused because the original lawsuit was against the previous Secretary of Health and Human Services, who has now been replaced with RFK Jr. So because of that, they decided that they were gonna continue to wait and see what happens. And one of the states that was included in the lawsuit, Iowa, their attorney general, Brenna Bird, she said she came out with a statement trying to reassure the public that despite the wording on the lawsuit, the target was, only the gender dysphoria rule and not the entire 504 as a whole, and that she will make sure that the act didn't get dismantled in the process. She claims that Biden and Harris forced transgender ideologies into schools at the expense of kids with disabilities. But can you?
And we all know
truly
that's a fucking
trust-
lie. We already
Right,
know that's
like-
a fucking lie. But continue.
Yeah, but like, can we really trust that what she's saying? Like, is she gonna be able to protect that? Because the lawsuit is already out there and the wording is already out there. So if they get a judge that decides that the wording, is correct and that they want to throw away like you say, throw the baby with the bathwater, then that they will do that. It's not up to her now. So like, it's frustrating.
As an aside, I'm sorry, I just gotta say this, guys, because like this is really something that really grinds my gears. That I listened to a bunch of different political pundits talk about why did the Democrats lose in 2024, and a lot of them were citing that Democrats overly talked about transgender issues. They overly, showed their support to transgender people, transgender rights, transgender sensibilities, and to the point where, some even went to the extreme to say that everybody needs to go ahead and put in their emails a signature line with their own pronouns. And that is such a fucking lie. I know that one of the things that Kamala Harris did is not mention her race, not mention her gender, and not mention where she actually falls on the gender spectrum as far as like her support. Never did it, not one time.
Right.
And even if you happen to look at some of the other campaigns that were running at the time with Democrats, a lot of them tried to escape that issue as well. And even, run to the point where they were trying to say that sports should be separate and that, any biological man should not be participating in women's sports. You actually had people who were running for federal positions that called themselves Democrat that actually said that. So this whole lie that the right is espousing that that the left is like completely debased themselves and has rolled themselves up into this ideology when it comes to gender is absolutely false. And I wish they really stopped doing that, but we live in an area where misinformation leads the narrative, and I think there's an old adage that says that a lie travels the world 10 times before the truth can get up and put its pants on.
Yeah.
Mark
And-
Twain.
Yeah, go ahead, Glenn.
One thing I wanted to say is that I agree that I don't think that the left lost because of their position on gender, but I do think that the right was very successful in putting gender very much in the forefront of people's minds. And you would think that we were about to be invaded by transgender aliens from outer space coming through Mexico the way they acted. But
True.
the reality is that it's such a negligible amount. They fabricated an issue, just like they've done time and time again. They've used LGBTQ people in the past. They used the Southern strategy. They used African Americans with it. This isn't anything new. This is the same thing, but this won't last forever. And as far as litigating why one side won and why one side lost, it's important to understand those things. But I have to say that in the future, I just don't think that there are the legs under making this minute proportion who need to be considered, not othered, but this minute proportion of people they're taking and trying to make it act like everything in the world that happens falls on the transgender, as some of them would use the term, because I feel like I'm listening in Animal Farm to blame the snowball for everything that happened bad in the entire farm because it's snowball. That's absolutely as absurd as they are with this issue, and I'm really hoping it wears thin. I'm not exactly sure how, but the first thing I say is that I don't want to fight them on their territory. I'm not going to argue with them about that, because the issues that really face us is not just that issue. It's that and others. And it starts with the way we treat people. And if we learn to treat people with respect, then whether you're trans, whether you're heteronormative, whether you're white, whether you're African American, whether you're Latino, whatever you are is not relevant if we can get people to understand that there's a level of human decency that we need to return to and push back against this othering and making a statistically insignificant portion of the population the boogeyman, that everything is their fault. That's what we had to push back against.
But their platform has always run on picking on minorities, starting with people of color way back when. Okay, that was like always picking on minorities. And currently, I guess their obsession is with genitals at this point. So, yeah.
Guess what? It works.
It
All I
does.
do is look out in the world and look at history,
Yep.
and it
Yeah.
works. And until the electric decides for it not to work anymore, it's going to continue to work.
Rinse and repeat.
You know, guys, I had a whole written down, noted assistant commentary to say at the end of the segment, but I can't do it now because all of you have got me thinking about one of my very favorite movies in the entire world, School Days. Love that damn movie. The music, the dancing, the acting, all of it was just absolutely spectacular. But I think that one of the things, it was actually written and directed by Spike Lee and produced by him and 40 Acres and a Mule. And one of the things that he was trying to, use, even though he used the elements of the musical and the dancing and the part and the performance and in the presentation in order for him to be able to present this art form, it was also an underlining message that was not necessarily so subvert, but very overt about waking up. And at the very end of the movie, the protagonist named Dak ran out of a dormitory in the middle of the quad and screamed, "Wake up!" He ran to his compatriots and went to their bed, their specific beds, and was like, "Wake up, wake up, wake up," shaking them to the point that they had to get the slumber off of their eyes in order for them to rise, to get him to get the hell off of him, right? And then you have another shot of, I would say the Spike Lee special, where you have your protagonist, and then all of a sudden the background is moving, but the protagonist is still, as they're screaming whatever the hell that they're screaming. In this particular case, it's wake up. And also, at the very end of the movie, after he has screamed wake up to his compatriots, screamed wake up to the quad, screamed wake up to the person that he woke up next to, screamed wake up to his roommate, he rang a bell. He rang a bell that looked very much so like the Liberty Bell that's in Pennsylvania. That's cracked. And all of a sudden you had the administration, students, staff, athletes, the whole nine, spill out from their various dormitories into the crowd, and formed a crowd, rather. Next thing you know, you had the antagonist meet Dap in the middle of the quad and looked at him without saying anything. And then both of them happened to turn their faces into the camera and said, "Please, wake up." And that is the only thing that I can tell our fellow electorate when it comes to any of these particular narratives that we are experiencing now. I totally need you, voter, need you, citizen, need you, mom and pop, need you who have a dog in this fight to wake up. And if you want to, dear viewer, watch more videos that could possibly help you do that, click here.